Just 30 years ago, Japan was on top of the world. It was the second largest economy, tech companies were dominating global markets, and everyone thought Japan would eventually overtake the US. But fast forward to today, Japan's economy hasn't grown in 3 decades. Its population is collapsing, its currency is weaker than ever, and it has become little more than a quiet satellite orbiting around Washington's agenda. What happened? Simple. The United States happened. The same country that bombed Japan into submission in 1945 found a new way to kill it decades later. Economically, Japan wasn't beaten in a fair fight. It was crushed, cornered, and manipulated by a friend wearing a suit instead of a uniform. And now Japan is being used once again, not for its rise, but as a pawn against China. After World War II, the US didn't just defeat Japan, it occupied it. From 1945 to 1952, Japan became a de facto US colony. Its constitution was rewritten under American supervision, most notably with Article 9, which prohibited Japan from having a real military. And guess who drafted that article? General Douglas MacArthur and the US military. This was never about peace. It was about permanently disarming a former rival while keeping them dependent. To this day, there are over 50,000 US troops stationed across Japan, including on Okinawa, a place where local resentment has festered for decades. These bases aren't just symbolic, they come with real consequences. There have been dozens of reported crimes committed by US servicemen over the years, including assaults, rapes, and fatal accidents, with most of the perpetrators shielded from Japanese prosecution under status of forces agreements. Japan doesn't even have full legal sovereignty on its own land when it comes to American troops. That's not an alliance, it's a leash. Please take a moment to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Japan's economic miracle, until it got too good. In the post-war years, Japan pulled off an economic miracle. With discipline, innovation, and state-backed industrial policy, it soared into the global top tier. By the 1980s, Japanese corporations were dominating electronics, cars, and semiconductors. The West was terrified. American media warned of a Japan takeover. They weren't paranoid. Japan really was on track to surpass the US economically. Japanese investors bought Rockefeller Center, Columbia Pictures, and high-value US real estate. US automakers were losing market share. There were trade surpluses year after year. Japan was getting too confident. And America, it doesn't like being second. The Plaza Accord, the silent economic assassination. Now we move on to the Plaza Accord of 1985. Behind closed doors in a New York hotel, the US pressured Japan and West Germany, France, the UK, into revaluing their currencies to fix America's ballooning trade deficit. Japan gave in. The yen appreciated rapidly, killing Japan's export-led model almost overnight. It sparked deflation, drove up the cost of Japanese goods, and kicked off a massive asset bubble that would implode just a few years later. Let's be clear. The US forced Japan to make this suicidal move. The Japanese stock market crashed in 1990. Real estate values vaporized. The Nikkei index still hasn't recovered to its 1989 peak, more than 3 decades later. This wasn't a natural downturn. This was a geopolitical hit job. Japan's lost decades, a permanent stall. Since the early 90s, Japan has been stuck in what economists call the lost decades, but it's more like a lost generation at this point. GDP growth is flat. Productivity gains are minimal, wages haven't moved. Young people in Japan don't even expect their lives to be better than their parents. They've normalized stagnation. The Bank of Japan has tried everything. Negative interest rates, massive bond buying programs, and endless stimulus. But it's like trying to revive a body that's already been embalmed. Japan's public debt to GDP ratio has ballooned to over 260%, the highest in the developed world. But despite all this printing, inflation barely moves. It's like someone cut the wires to the engine and told them to keep pressing the gas pedal. And demographically, it's a ticking time bomb. Japan is the oldest country in the world with more diapers sold for adults than babies. The population is shrinking every year, and thanks to xenophobic immigration policies and cultural insularity, there's no way to replenish it. They're literally dying in slow motion. Despite being a G7 nation, Japan doesn't control its own foreign or security policy. Washington does. Anytime there's regional tension, whether it's Taiwan, North Korea, or the South China Sea, Japan jumps when the US says jump. They've recently been dragged into anti-China chip blockades, forced to restrict exports of key semiconductor tech, and pulled into every single US-led Asia strategy like Quad and AUKUS-like partnerships. And how does the US repay Japan's loyalty? By ignoring its requests. When Japan asked the US to ease steel tariffs during the Trump years, it got slapped with more duties. When it wanted reassurances on economic cooperation, it got shoved aside in favor of Australia or South Korea. Japan is always currying favor with Washington, trying to be the model ally, and always getting betrayed. They host the troops, buy the weapons, parrot the talking points, but when the US decides it's time to escalate tensions with China, Japan is the one put in the line of fire. They don't even get to ask why. They just get the script. Make no mistake, Japan is not America's friend, it's America's tool. The US uses Japan to box in China, apply economic pressure, and set up forward military positions in Asia. Japan is now allowed to remilitarize, not for itself, but to support America's imperial ambitions. This isn't independence, it's conditional usefulness. The more Japan plays Washington's game, the worse it gets. They lose Chinese tourists, Chinese students, Chinese trade, all while falling further into US dependence. Japan knows it's being played, but it's too deep to walk away. Now contrast this with China. China told the US no, repeatedly. No to rewriting its constitution, no to foreign troops, no to giving up control over its economy. China watched what the US did to Japan and made sure it never happened to them. And now, China is the world's largest manufacturing power, leads in 5G AI, high-speed rail, and has lifted 800 million people out of poverty, while the US still deals with homelessness and school shootings. The difference between China and Japan is spine. Japan gave in and got caged. China stood firm and built an empire. Japan never failed. It was sabotaged. It was rising too fast, getting too confident, and had to be clipped. The US did that, and has kept Japan on a leash ever since. Today, Japan's economy is frozen in time, its population is vanishing, and its foreign policy is just a loudspeaker for Washington. The saddest part? Japan still tries to impress the US, still bends over backward to be useful, still clings to the illusion of partnership, all while getting played like a fool. Japan could have been a true Asian powerhouse. Instead, it's been reduced to America's obedient, aging sidekick, watching China take the future it was never allowed to have. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe for more content.